was a great. I went to the what was it called, the homeless court, the hard court. It was really good. They did a good job. Julie was up there, yeah. Oh yeah. Oh wow. Okay. I'll do it. I'll just refer to you on mayor's update. Okay. The study session of the Aurora City Council for Monday, March 23rd, 2026 is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Kaufman.
Here.
Councilmember Andrews.
Here.
Councilmember Bergen.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tim Coombs.
Present.
Councilmember Gardner.
Here.
Councilmember Hancock.
Here.
Councilmember Horton.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Here.
Councilmember Lawson.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember Wiles.
Here.
Mayor's update. I will defer to City Attorney Pete Schulte.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know that Jack Bajorek, stand up for me, sir.
Stand up.
Jack is retiring April 6th. I know, boo, April 3rd, but he, this is his last council meeting, so.
Yes,
So he's done a long time with the city, so I just wanted to highlight that we're going to miss him dearly. So,
Hey, good stuff.
thank you, Mayor.
Are there any issues?
Big smile on his
I'm a little jealous. Just saying.
Okay. Are there any issue updates? Seeing none, is there any objection to move the consent calendar forward? Item number 2A through 2Q. Seeing none, the consent calendar will move forward. Item number 3A, Aurora Police Department and Aurora U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Processing Center. Memorandum of Understanding. Mark Hildebrand?
Yeah, right here. Right here. Yeah, basically, just so the board's aware.
Oh, could you
Yeah, go up to the podium.
Podium.
Sorry, yeah, so we can get you on the microphone, Chief.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, what this does is basically, it really clarifies what the Aurora Police Department will do in response to emergencies. We have always had a MOU with the GEO facility. The GEO facility, as everybody knows, is in the city of Aurora, so that is the impact and that is what we have to make sure. The one thing that we wanted to make sure is that we were good stewards with what was occurring within the GEO facility. So on the old MOU, again, it gave some very specific guidelines about what would be considered a cold escape, a warm escape, how we would deploy, what we would do. It basically put parameters on how our responsibility and how we would go about our business. The new one is much broader. It's like I said, it basically establishes coordination between public safety responses. It's a very clear, lawful, organized. It does not expand the authority whatsoever of the GEO facility. The one thing I want to make very clear, this is not an immigration enforcement authority. Our officers are not deputized. It's all written within the MOU. Our officers do not become deputized as federal immigration officers. We do not enforce civil immigration, which is, again, very consistent with local and state law related to the enforcement of immigration. As a municipal law enforcement agency, we do not focus on immigration enforcement. We, and this MOU, the new one, is well within the compliance of the Colorado law, which basically prohibits local law enforcement agencies from detaining someone solely based on federal immigration detainer. So that is not what we do or changes. Why the agreement is necessary. Again, it already exists within the city of Aurora. The GEO facility is here. What we wanted to make sure is that incidents that occur, Aurora Police will inevitably be called, and we will be. So the MOU ensures that we follow a clear command structure, communication protocols, and legal framework. This is about public safety. That's what it's about. This is not about enforcement of immigration. It's not about us becoming involved in the immigration enforcement. It is about if there is a public safety matter around where someone leaves that facility, how we would respond, what we would do as far as municipal law enforcement agency professionals and not as federal immigration. What the agreement does not do, and again, I really want to sound very clear on this, it does not create us as an immigration enforcement authority. It does not change Colorado immigration law whatsoever or how we impact that. It does allow APD to hold individual and civil immigration detainers if they are removed. It does not allow us to do that at all. And it shifts responsibility from the operating and detention facility to the city. It does not allow that either. So really, everything that is in the new MOU is things that were in the old MOU. They are just codified in a much more clear and concise manner. Aurora PD is not in the immigration business, but we are in the public safety business. And if there is somebody who escapes or somebody who flees that facility, this now provides us with a structure of incident command that allows us to know exactly how we would operate, how we would function in accordance with those federal partnerships and those expectations of what would be done. As you guys recall, we had the 3 individuals that escaped. And again, there was a lot of discussion about, Aurora PD dropped the ball. Well, we didn't drop the ball. That call came out almost 6 to 7 hours after they had left the facility, and it deviated completely from what was in the original MOU. That was the beginning of why we looked at this new MOU to make sure that, again, consistently with incident command systems, with NIMS, with everything that's related to that, we stayed consistent and didn't go beyond what we are supposed to do in the realm of immigration for local, state, or federal law.
Question?
Mark, anything to add?
No, I think you covered everything.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions of the chief? Councilmember Bergen, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for the presentation and the clarification that's in the MOU. The way it's structured is a lot easier to read. Just in terms of an escape, it has on here, an APD supervisor will contact the AIPC to fully assess the circumstances and then coordinate an appropriate response. So if the facility would contact you, right, that there's been an escapee or multiple, how long does it take between, obviously they need to communicate immediately to you, but from that point on, from the supervisor contacting the AIPC to assess the situation, how long does that take? Could the person be gone out of state by then?
They could be, and that's why it's based on the situation. Each case is going to have its own merits. As you might remember on the last one, again, they said, hey, this was a hot case. Well, it wasn't. We determined that it was 6 hours later. In 6 hours, where that location is, they could be not only in another city, they could be in an actual another state.
Right.
And so that's where the assessment of our supervisors, that's where the training component is going to come into place as the implementation of this MOU takes place, making sure that each event is assessed on its own. Now, if they call and say, hey, we're watching somebody running out and they're running over towards the Noble facility, we need somebody here now, then we'll respond and we will do what we need to do to support their efforts and support the community to ensure that they're safe. But each case will be evaluated based upon what information they are getting, and that was one of the big glitches that occurred last time. And Mark?
Yeah, there's a difference between somebody, escaping on foot.
can you come up to the
if they're on foot in
microphone?
the area. Sorry. There's a difference between somebody escaping on foot and they believe they're still on foot in the area, or they see them get into a vehicle and they flee. Our response is going to be different. Our communication with our other partners are going to be different because you can travel a large distance in a vehicle and they're probably not in the immediate area. We need to notify other law enforcement agencies, get a bolo out on the vehicle. So that's why that supervisor needs to assess the circumstances, the risk factors, the threat to the community to ensure that we have the proper resources responding.
And they would tell you, the facility would tell you if they were, I know they have like 3 stages of people within the facility. So there's the highest level where would pose the highest danger, obviously, to the public. So you would have that information.
Yeah, or the supervisor is going to ask if that's not initially provided to assess the risk to the community. Escaping that is a Title 18 offense. It is a criminal offense for somebody to flee that facility. That's why it has no association to immigration. That is a criminal federal offense.
Okay.
Thank you.
If I could defer to the city attorney before I go to Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, and I'll state that, first of all, my office did go through this MOU, very detailed, and it does comply with, as the chief stated, with state law and federal law, but more specifically state law, that we don't do immigration enforcement. And second of all, there are 5 factors in the MOU that the supervisor from APD will evaluate. And so I think the question is going to come up is if we have somebody that's in this detention facility that's just on a immigration detainer, that's not a warrant, and they escape, as Chief Hildebrand stated, that is a criminal offense. So that'll go into the factor about our response. Is that right, Chief?
That is exactly correct, because it transitions from just an immigration issue to now a violation of a federal offense.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so the contents all make sense. My only question is the term is for 10 years. And right now, the contract that GEO has with the federal government ends this October. So is there any language there or that we can put in there that would end the MOU should the contract not be renewed?
And that is covered at the end of this MOU, that mutual agreement to sever this MOU, but either one party can give a 90-day notice, but this has nothing to do with contractual. This is just an agreement of understanding between us of how we'll coordinate a response to an incident. If there's contract issues, that would sever this MOU.
And Mayor Pro Tem, if this facility does not get renewed and it closes, the MOU expires.
Okay, so that's legally,
Yes. Because it's an MOU between the two parties, a memorandum of understanding, if one of the parties doesn't exist anymore, it expires.
Further questions? Do we have to move this forward? Yes. Okay. Seeing no further questions, is there any objection to moving item number 3A forward? Seeing no objection, item number 3A will move forward. Thank you, Chief. Item number 3B, Stage 1 water shortage. Marshall Brown.
I should have done that already. Okay, Mayor, Council, Marshall Brown, General Manager of Aurora Water, here to talk this evening about the need for Stage 1 watering restrictions. I have a few bullet points to pull up on a presentation to keep myself on track. Most of you are probably aware that the water supply situation this year is dire. We have not received much snow, and our reservoirs are at extremely low levels. Specifically, we are at 58% in our reservoirs right now, which means we have about a year and a half worth of usable supply there. And somebody's helping me. This is a picture taken about a month ago at Spinney Mountain Reservoir. So we have 12 reservoirs in our system. Spinney Mountain Reservoir is the largest supply for Aurora. Even though Aurora Reservoir is here in town, Aurora Reservoir holds about 29,000 acre-feet of water, which is usable about half of a year's supply. Spinney Mountain is about twice that size, and as you can see there, it's less than half full. The other thing concerning about this image is right now what we would like to see up there, or in February when this is taken, is a lot of snow, and you see there is no snow. So those who've driven through Park County recently have seen some of our watersheds. So snowpack for Aurora, where we get our water supplies, and again, that's out of the Colorado Basin, the Arkansas Basin, and the South Platte Basin. Those three basins where we get our water supply, the snowpack's at about 49% of average. So that's bad. Staff is projecting we will probably receive about 1/3 of our typical water supply this year, which will likely not be enough to maintain the 58% of full condition in our reservoirs. Our reservoirs will likely continue to draw down, potentially even through the spring runoff period where usually they start to fill. We may see a little bit of storage come in early and then it will be depleted later. So bad conditions. This is true statewide. Governor Polis on March 16th activated the drought task force for the state of Colorado, including phase 2 of the drought response plan. So Aurora's not by ourselves in this situation, and those who've been watching the news recently probably noted that there are a couple of other water utilities who have already implemented stage 1 watering restrictions. Thornton and Erie. Denver Water is going to their board later this week with a similar recommendation. So if we can move to the next slide. This one's just showing our current snowpack. Again, pretty bad. You can see the green line there, which is kind of typical water content conditions. We're down in the black, kind of below all those other colors. So it's not a good situation. Next slide. So what we are recommending, and we will bring to council, should you all agree at the regular session on April 6th, would be a stage 1 water shortage response. You all recently approved our latest version of our water shortage response plan. This is a bit of a summary of what's outlined in there for a stage 1 response. It would reduce outdoor watering to 2 days a week on assigned days. So a normal restriction, Aurora and many other neighboring entities have normal conditions where we allow watering 3 days a week, not between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. So this reduces that back to 2 days per week. It also assigns days based on customer type. So even and odd single-family residential customers will have 2 assigned days each. Commercial customers get assigned days per week. So we try to buffer the demands in our system to keep them relatively steady, which is in everybody's best interest as well. And so that's one of the reasons we have those days assigned. Also, no cool weather turf will be allowed to be installed, so that's no Kentucky bluegrass. A little bit of a caveat on that, we will allow warm season turfs to be installed. So that's primarily for us right now. Tahoma 31 is the approved warm season turf. So if we have somebody who is planning to do a turf installation, they can proceed, just not with a cool season turf. Kentucky bluegrass, fescue are the 2 most common. They would have to switch over to a Tahoma 31 Bermuda grass or native grasses. Private pool filling will not be allowed during stage 1 drought restrictions. So as we bring this to you on April 6th, we are proposing it with a waiver of reconsideration to be effective on April 7th. So after April 7th, the response plan technically does not allow private pool filling. There's been a bit of a question for some people. They may have certain conditions that require them to fill their private pool associated with insurance covenants, apparently. They could fill that, but they would be paying a slightly higher water rate, and I'll talk about that in a minute. They would also receive a violation notice. The first violation in a stage 1 response is a warning with no fine. Additional violations start to incur fines. So private pools are a little bit interesting. We don't have a lot of those, but we do have a few. Decorative water features are also not allowed to operate. You may see some water features out there operating. It's a little bit interesting. Some of our water features are purely decorative. Some of them have functional purposes. So there are aeration needs in some stormwater features. So we try to track those from decorative versus functional. Functional can still
Quick question here,
occur.
and that is, how do you classify? We have a lot of homeowners associations that have pools. How do you classify those?
Yeah, great question, Mayor. Homeowners associations are considered community pools, so public and community pools can be filled and topped off. What stage 1 restrictions affect are private pools only. Okay, and then as we recently added to the water management plan or drought response plan,
Restaurants, and we were ramping up this communication this year anyway, are being asked not to serve water except upon request, and that's a huge opportunity for additional conversation and education with people to make them aware of the crisis we're in. Next slide. Okay, the next slide talks about how the surcharges work. Surcharges are a little bit interesting, and they work a little bit differently depending on the customer type. So all accounts except irrigation only have a $2.15 surcharge applied per 1,000 gallons above 110% of the winter quarter average. So a winter quarter average is indoor water use. It's the water use over December, January, and February. We average those 3 months out. We establish a winter quarter average. That winter quarter average is used year-round on which to base sewer charges. During a drought, what happens is we look at that indoor water use and we say we're going to plus that up by 10%, so 110% of the winter quarter average, which allows for some outdoor irrigation, not under surcharge. And above that, the $2.15 surcharge applies to each 1,000 gallons. So it's a lot of water. $2.15 is added to the $5.85 roughly base fee. So people's base rate per 1,000 gallons of water above the winter quarter average goes up to, what is that, about $8 per 1,000 gallons.
Councilmember Bergen.
I have a question with, how does the surcharge work with the tiers? So if you, obviously, we're trying to conserve water with the drought. If they end up in a tier 2 or tier 3, which is already high, then how does that surcharge affect? Because it obviously per 1,000 gallons.
Yeah, great question. And thank you for the question, because the rate I just talked about is the tier 1 rate. So above 5,000 gallons of use, the rate goes up to a tier 2 rate until you hit 10,000 gallons. And the $2.15 surcharge is on top of whatever tier you're in. So I think tier 2 is a roughly $8 rate. It would add the $2.15 to that and go up to $10 roughly per 1,000 gallons. Same for tier 3 and tier 4.
So we have a lot of residents, probably in a number of wards, that do end up in tier 2 pretty consistently, and some in my area, and I think in 5, in the tier 3. So even if they reduce it to 2 days a week, are they going to hit the surcharge with that tier?
Yes.
And how much, I mean, we could talk $1,000 a month, right?
So the
500?
way the surcharge was done or calculated was the finance group backed into looking at if people save 20% of their use with the surcharge added to their volumetric rate, their water bill would remain essentially flat.
Okay.
So people would pay the same bill that they did last year. However, they're getting less water. So they're using, if they use 80% of the water, they'll pay the same amount. If they can use less than 80% of the water, which applies to most of those large outdoor irrigation spaces, their bill would actually go down. So there's opportunities for those people to most customers with any kind of outdoor landscaping, sizable amount, their bill should go down a little bit. But if they use 20% less water, the surcharge is calculated to allow the same amount of recovery of cost for the utility. And there's a couple of reasons we do that. The main reason, though, and you all, council, have approved for us this year already, 2 acquisitions or leases of additional water to supplement our system. So when we're extremely stressed, we go everywhere we can to find additional water to supplement supplies. and that adds additional costs that we then have to figure out how to pay for. And so that's part of what the surcharge allows us for. So most of our customers should see a relatively flat or slightly lower bill if they target that 20% or better in savings.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, is there, oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Gardner?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Marshall, a question around developers and, parks that they have to put in. Do the drought restrictions change those responsibilities at all? Because obviously some of those parks have significant amounts of, turf, grass that's going to require a lot of watering. And so just curious what that looks like as we enter into stage 1 drought restrictions.
Yeah, another great question. And that's kind of what the bullet up there on the last slide that was talking about, no new cool season turf installations. So what we will be asking of developers for the common space areas or single-family residential homes or commercial areas, any areas that have turf programmed, we want them to switch to a Tahoma 31 instead of the Kentucky Bluegrass Fescue mixes. So they can still proceed with those installations as long as they switch to the warm season turfs and stay away from the cool season turfs that are a lot thirstier. If they do that, we then will give them a watering permit to allow them to establish the Tahoma 31. It will use a little bit more water in the establishment period than we would like, but the long-term payback and benefit to the system is worth that short-term, slightly higher additional water use. So that's been our approach, or that is the approach in the plan with new developments, common space, single family, any of the spaces that have turf installations planned.
Okay, just point of clarification, so that in new development, we've had some functional areas that allowed cool weather turf, and so now under this guideline, we're not allowing any areas. And is that to include, I think it was 45% or 500 square feet, whichever is less in a backyard. So that includes that area too.
Yes,
Okay.
Mayor, that is correct. So those areas that would still like to move forward with turf installations for active programmed recreation or the 500 square feet in the backyards, we would be asking them to switch to a Tahoma 31,
Okay.
which will work in, we think, pretty much all of those spaces as well or better than the cool season
Okay.
terms.
Councilmember.
I think it's going to be really important to educate the builders, because there's going to be people that expect to have the Kentucky Bluegrass in the 500 square feet in their backyard, and then they're not going to be able to put it in, and they're going to put a down payment on that house and thinking they're going to have that in their backyard, and they're going to have brown dirt unless they do the Bermuda or the Tahoma. And the Tahoma is actually, I think you said in the Water Policy Committee last week, that it's in short supply. So I just wonder if developers are even going to be able to purchase it.
Yeah. The Tahoma 31 supply is limited. I think hopefully that's what I said. Not necessarily short, meaning that it's only sold through licensed vendors, nurseries. And so there's one major nursery that has a license, and they've sub-licensed apparently other nurseries to provide Tahoma 31. There have been some conversations where they appear to be excited for the opportunity to get more Tahoma 31 out there. From a home buyer perspective, the good news is that the Tahoma 31 likes to be installed in the summer more than a Kentucky Bluegrass likes to be installed in the summer. So the installations actually will go smoother during a drought and be better. And we think most people will be happy with the Tahoma 31. It's actually a little friendlier for most applications with kids running around,
I
things
think
like
it's
that.
just making sure that as the water department, that you just, do the education to the Home Builders Association so that they get that information out for residents.
Yes, thank you. Lots of communication we're going to need to be getting out.
But
for sure.
isn't it where you're not allowing any new installation of cool weather turf, including in existing properties, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then, are you going to be putting out information, I think we talked about this, about there's a free program, I think, that your department has on water-wise landscaping, where you go out and I think and do the design. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay.
We have free design for conversions of cool season turf to water-friendly, water-wise landscapes. And so we'll continue, we're ramping up actually our programs and our capabilities to be able to do even more of that this year, the free designs, and then implement rebates. We also have low-income programs available for people who are interested and would qualify. So we're ramping up all of our programs to try to be supportive of getting water-wise landscaping out in the community during the drought.
Yeah, I know you sent us something about this, information on the stage 1 drought restrictions, but if we could get something on the water-wise design, that'd be great to put that out as well. Further, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Gardner.
Oh,
Yeah, I had some
Councilman Gardner.
faults. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I had some follow-ups, Marshall. So the first one is kind of along the same lines of what Councilmember Bergen was talking about, but I guess asking more specifically, what outreach is going to be done to developers? Because I had a developer specifically ask me this question of, what impact does this have? And so just want to make sure that there's going to be some communication. And then the other piece of it is, I just want to make sure I understand you correctly. So, because we kind of shifted the focus a little bit to backyard turf, but what about park installations? Is it the same where no new cool season installations, cool season grass, it's warm season grass only for parks as well?
Correct. Yes, Councilmember Gardner. So we have started conversations with developers, not all of them yet, but we are going to ramp that up additionally, get out there and communicate with the development community. And yes, the no cool season turf, so Kentucky bluegrass fescue in parks, common areas, or open spaces either. So those will have to, during the drought, switch over to warm season grasses, or they do have a choice to wait. We would rather that they proceed with the warm season installation, but they could postpone until we get out of the drought.
Further,
Great, thank you.
Okay, next slide, I want to, and there may be questions on this too, but I want to clarify, there's actually a couple more slides, I think. So irrigation-only accounts work a little differently. So we have about 1,500 irrigation-only accounts in the city, including some of ourselves, and school districts have some of these, common spaces, parks. So irrigation accounts, we lose all of the water. The other accounts we talked about have that 110% of winter quarter average is how we base the charges. Irrigation, because a lot of the water for the other accounts, we recover and it comes back to us in the sewer and we can use it over and over again. So what we're really targeting here is outdoor water use. It's the water we can't recover. We don't get it back and can't use it over and over again. So irrigation accounts, from the first gallon they use, will see the surcharge. So they don't have a winter quarter average that it applies to because they aren't supposed to be using water in the winter. So when these accounts turn on, their rate is increased by the $2.15 for the first gallon they use. Now, these are also the accounts that have the easiest opportunity to reduce their use by 20% because, again, no indoor use. If you think about it, you go from 3 days a week to 2 days a week and you don't change. We don't want people to increase the length of time they're irrigating because it creates other problems, including water runoff, water waste, and it doesn't really help the vegetation anyway. So you leave your timer the same, you cut back to 2 days a week, and you save 33.3% of your water. So these accounts should be paying less money every single one of them this year. If they follow our guidance, it should be very easy, but they will see higher volumetric rates on their bills. So that's different from our other accounts. These are unique that way. With that, I think there's one more. Is there one? Yep. So enforcement, we've had stage 1 drought restrictions in Aurora a couple of times over the last 15 years. We've been pretty lenient on enforcement. We've done multiple warnings, and we've not had great effectiveness with water use reductions. So this year, we have AMI meters, automated metering infrastructure, where we'll be able to tell exactly what our customers are doing. In prior years, we've been dependent upon people calling and notifying us of what their neighbors or friends are doing, and then we've sent people out to investigate, take pictures, respond. This year, we have that ability remotely through the data. We can tell when irrigation systems turn on. We can tell when pools fill. We can tell when people have leaks. So this year, we are planning more strict enforcement. This year is a more dire situation than any of the previous watering restrictions I've been here for. This is actually the first or second worst year on record for water supply. It's bad. So first violation for all types of customers is a warning. So we try to reach out, either phone call, email, or door hanger, to get in contact with the customer. Second violation, though, leads to a fine. And I should point out, single-family residential customers have 7 days to try to get back into compliance and quit watering so much. Commercial and other accounts only have 3 days. So then the second violation you can see is a fine for single-family residential accounts, $125. That would be applied to the water bill. Third violation. So second violation, 125. Third violation, 250. All additional violations, 500, which gets pretty steep. The commercial accounts, multifamily and irrigation, start out at 250 for the for the second violation after the warning. Third violation goes to 1,000. All additional violations go to 2,000. So I will note, we are already getting emails and letters from some of our customers telling us they heard this was coming, and they don't care what we tell them, they are not going to reduce their watering. So it could be an interesting year for us. And some of them will probably pay the fines. Some of them may call you all and not want to pay the fines.
Sure, we get calls.
Just,
Councilmember Bergen.
we all know sprinkler heads sometimes get damaged and spout a ton of water out, and you may not know if you're doing your watering at 4 in the morning, you may not know until 8 in the morning or whatever. I mean, hopefully that would be a warning, but obviously it's going to spike your water usage. Is there any remedy for, I didn't know and then I fixed it?
Yes, so another good question. We do still have a leak adjustment policy that we can apply to this. Another great thing with AMI is we can tell the difference between leaks and normal irrigation. So we'll know, we'll reach out, we'll communicate. That's one of the reasons we did a 7-day compliance period for single-family residential versus 3-day for commercial. Commercial entities, they're all operated by businesses who you can get in touch with. Sometimes single-family residential, they might be on vacation, they might be out of town. So we have a longer grace period. We have a leak adjustment policy. And we also have an appeal process. So we have all of those things to protect for the kind of odd, unexpected things that may happen.
Thank you.
And I had a reminder that we also have, and we will be encouraging people to sign up for one of 2 monitoring tools. So Single-family, any customer can go sign up for what's called Eye on Water.
Okay.
Online, it's spelled EYE on water. And that allows you to either download an app to your phone or monitor your water use. It allows you to set up alarms, triggers, so it can actually, our system can notify people of leaks as well. The other one is through SpryPoint, which is our billing system, so where you pay your water bill. If you pay electronically, you can also go in there and set very similar alarms and triggers up for your water use. Also have another program called Know Your Flow, which is a voluntary, all three of those are voluntary, but it's a voluntary program where you can sign up and we'll send you a monthly report of, hey, here's how much water you're using, here's what you told us about your property. We think you're using above or below average or typical type water use. So 3 different programs to help people monitor their water use as well.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Any further questions? Is there any objection to moving 3B forward? Seeing none, 3B will move forward. And I'm sorry about your inflatable pool for your dog.
That's a joke from the mayor.
Okay. Item number 4A, Municipal Court, update regarding Simon.
I think I want to get a picture of this. And two of you standing up there together. You know, kumbaya.
Without boxing
right.
gloves?
We've actually been doing a lot of kumbaya
A lot of collaboration
the
going
last
on.
2 weeks, so just I'll have you know.
Julie Heckman, Chief Deputy City Attorney,
And Elizabeth Cadiz, Chief Public Defender.
and we are presenting tonight really in response to Mayor Pro Tem's question at Public Safety about kind of the update on what has been happening post the Camp or Simmons response. So we've kind of tackled that in 2 parts. Ms. Cadiz is going to talk about the first part, which is the kind of a look at the different ordinances in our code, or a lot of those ordinances. That's a very big undertaking, but we have spent a lot of time going through that. So she's going to talk about that first, and then I'm going to talk about some of the safeguards that we've all been putting in place and how we're working together and individually over in the municipal court under what we have now with the new ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court. All right.
I had asked specifically for a list. I didn't see anything in the backup. Do we have access or availability? Can we get the list of what they're going to be discussing?
Sure. So it's work product, so we didn't include it in the backup, but I instructed Julie that if any council member requests it, we'll provide it to you, but just with the understanding that it's work product, not to be shared outside of the city council.
Okay.
So yes, we do have that, and we can get
All
that
right.
to you, but, so I hear you making that request, so Julie and Elizabeth? Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
It's good because we've made a few edits since we were.
Yeah, that's another reason why I was like, really working. It's truly a work product.
So just a quick recap, what we're talking about is Camp Simons, the decision from the Supreme Court that said municipalities can prosecute criminal violations that are like those being prosecuted under state law, but when they do that, the penalties can't exceed the maximum penalty under the same, for what the same conduct is punished at under state law. And so just so you all are kind of thinking about this as I go through it, I'm just going to give you some examples and just some high-level basic information rather than get too far into the weeds, or at least I'll try. But under our code currently, section 1-13 provides for up to 364 days in jail and up to a $2,650 fine for any violation unless noted. And so right now, really the exception to that is where the mandatory minimums are still in the code. So that's retail theft, motor vehicle theft, and dine and dash. Under state law, and what we're talking about here are the non-felony offenses, and those are classified as class 1 or class 2 misdemeanors, petty offenses, civil or fine only. And so they have sort of a tiered system where our penalty provision allows the court to, sentence, to determine between 0 and 364 how many days jail, for instance, under a Class 2, the max authorized sentence, Class 2 misdemeanor, the max authorized sentence would be 120 days imprisonment and a $750 fine. So we have been reviewing our code. We focused, at least this round, on Chapter 94, which contains the bulk of the criminal violations. In all told, I think we looked at something like 135 different sections, and mostly we agreed, both sides agreed as to whether or not the ordinance or the charge was actually impacted at all by the decision, meaning whether the penalty provision should be changed or needs to be changed as a result, and then also what that classification should be. So we actually agreed on all but 4, which is pretty good. Like I said, kumbaya. And we left a handful out, around 10, that we're going to recommend that the city attorney's office that specializes in writing the law, understanding it,
Valiant effort.
dig in on that.
Valiant effort.
Mostly those have to do with the drug offenses and the weapons offenses. They're just really hairy and complex. But to give you an idea, what we found was something like 65% of all of our, at least these criminal violations, are impacted in various ways. And most of those that are impacted, something like 43, are would be Class 2 misdemeanors under the state code. So that's a difference of up to 364 versus 120. Some examples of that would include resisting arrest, motor vehicle trespass, and then theft or retail theft that's between $300 and $1,000. Those would all classify as Class 2 offenses under the state code. Like I said, that's just a few examples to highlight. Those are ones that we see frequently. We did identify some Class 1 misdemeanors. Under the state code, a Class 1 misdemeanor carries up to 364 days jail, a $1,000 fine. And some examples of those would be violation of court order, where it's a DV, protection order, or a menacing charge. And then we also identified around 25 different offenses or violations under the municipal code that would be considered petty offenses under the state code. So that's a pretty big difference between the up to 364 and no more than 10 days and a $300 fine, which is the max penalty for a petty offense. Those are things like unauthorized camping, all subsections of prostitution, trespass, and then property crimes where the value is less than $300. There were a handful that we identified that under the state code also are quite a bit different and just require a fine only, and those would be considered a civil infraction. There were another few where it could be petty or Class 2 depending on the conduct, such as false declaration or an attempted violation. And then we also agreed on over 30 charges that we don't think were impacted by the decision. So what that means would just be that there isn't a state code provision that punishes the same conduct as that which we're punishing. And so that would include things like disorderly conduct, failure to obey, aggressive begging. We identified a couple that we think had originally been drafted to mirror state code provisions that are now repealed, but it really runs the gamut. False statement to city personnel, down to prohibited use of skateboards. So those kinds of things.
I'm sorry, quick clarification, so prohibited use of skateboards could technically be charged under the general penalty provision since it's not impacted?
Yes, and I've never seen it. I would assume that
Why do we have it?
it's just probably more juveniles that are doing that, and juveniles don't face a potential jail sentence. I've never actually seen that charged.
We would do a fine, if anything, on those. Come on,
Yeah.
not that much of a hard.
No, I've never seen a but I'm just giving you an example. They really do run the gamut.
Right, but there's also like the failure to obey, for example, that could carry up to 364.
Right.
Under the general penalty.
Also, though, like battery. So battery is one of the most frequently charged offenses in our city. Our battery is really more like the state's assault. It's the common law. Yeah, that's the term. It's the old way of saying that. So, we see a lot of that. That's one of our most charged ordinance violations, but it doesn't punish the same conduct that's punished under the state code. So like in that circumstance, it might be more warranted for the 364. So there's a whole gamut.
Okay.
And then really our only disagreement comes down to a couple different property-related areas. The first is as it relates to sections 9473, injury to property, 9474, theft, and then retail theft. Under the state code, we agree that they are impacted because there is a state code corollary. But our ordinance, my position or the public defender's position would be that because our ordinance expressly limits or describes that the conduct is up to $1,000 in value, so theft of up to $1,000 or property damage of up to $1,000, that it would then be capped at the 120-day Class 2 max authorized sentence. And the city's position is that because the state misdemeanor, Class 1 misdemeanor punishes between $1,000 and $1,999, that in those circumstances, the city would warrant a Class 1 penalty, if that makes sense. Sorry, I know that's all probably too weedy, but that's really our only area of agreement. It does come up a lot. So, for instance, disagreement. That's our only disagreement, though. So, it's pretty good for us, I think.
Okay, further question? Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
And then the other thing is injury to property, so it's the same thing. So our ordinance says it's a theft in the city if you do X and the value is up to $1,000. Under the state code, it's still a misdemeanor if you steal something and the value is up to $1,999. And between $1,000 and $1,990, it's a Class 1, and therefore up to 364 days in jail. But because our ordinance says only less than 1,000, anyway, it doesn't matter. We don't need to get into all of it. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
No, I'm just trying to understand, Mayor.
Yes, please proceed.
So would this be an area that merits examination as we're going through to do the code revision, to make sure that we're
Yes.
lining up? Because presumably at some point they did line up and then
Yes, exactly
it
right.
changed.
And I'll comment on that as well. So if that does come up in a case, right? I haven't seen it come up yet, but if it does, then we have the judiciary, right? The judiciary is going to look at this and make the decision on whether or not it says until we can get the code changed, because it's going to be a policy decision, right, by council on how you want to do moving forward. And so that's where we are, and that's what Julie will talk about,
Right.
the safeguards that we have.
Okay. Councilmember Bergen?
I mean, I understand why you're doing this, because obviously you got to reconcile the code to make sure that it's in alignment with the state. Honestly, though, we had harsher penalties for certain crimes in the city of Aurora to protect victims, to protect our residents. So we no longer have that authority as a municipality to impose harsher penalties. And it's really very complicated with all this code change that you guys are going to have to do. Personally, I think we should stop hearing criminal cases altogether, just like Centennial does. And I think it would save the taxpayers a lot of money. In fact, City Manager, do you have any idea the amount of money it would save taxpayers per year?
We spend about $7 million a year on municipal court right now.
Criminal offenses.
Criminal offenses.
So we could continue to do the civil,
Traffic, zoning, and animal cases.
and not do the criminal, save $7 million a year for our residents and not have all this, confusion. I mean, it's basically the state has taken away our authority, our home rule authority on those harsher penalties that did protect our residents, and now we don't have it. So I'd say good riddance.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I mean, I think that's a separate conversation for a different day. There are reasons why we might not want to do that came up during the DV conversation. And we can talk about those later because I don't want to derail this conversation where we have some other important stuff to
Okay,
discuss.
further,
But worth mentioning anyway.
okay, Julie, Elizabeth, do you have anything else?
Yes.
Oh, Julie.
I don't think so. I was just going to say that to your point, Councilmember Bergen, there are certain ordinance violations where arguably we would maybe see a criminal violation here that wouldn't be charged in the state because our ordinance actually expands the range of the conduct that could be criminalized. For instance, under the harassment section. So our harmful, painful, offensive contact, there is something like it at the state code, but you might be charged with that here for conduct that is, doesn't meet the requirements of the state provision. Same with battery. And so we saw that in a lot of the DV cases that, I don't want to say a lower bar, but it was, from a policy perspective, expanded the ability to charge folks with, things that you will find to be important as criminal violations, like aggressive begging, unlawful peeping. Those things are not at all punished. So I'll just throw that in. Thank you.
Julie?
And one thing, just to add to that point, and to the two comments, one that Councilmember Bergen said that we had harsher penalties, and then Mayor Pro Tem said at one time the penalties were similar. It's more what the Mayor Pro Tem said, so I just wanted to make that clear. I don't know how long ago, but Section 1-13, which is our general penalty provision that says anything that is a municipal ordinance violation can get up to $2,650 as a fine or up to 364 days jail or both. At the time that was implemented, that was the exact same penalty for all of these things that are in the state court that are considered misdemeanors, not felonies.
But we implemented minimum, maximum
Yes.
sentences for motor vehicle theft, for retail theft, and dine and dash.
True.
Okay.
And so I was just thinking, when you said harsher penalties, I'm thinking of the potential maximum penalty were the same until several years ago, the state legislature took on a project and looked at what they called low-level offenses, and that's when they changed the maximum penalties from 364 days, because ours did mirror at one time what the same types of conduct in the state. They changed those to exactly what Ms. Cadiz said, either a Class 1 misdemeanor, which would be maximum 364 days and $1,000 fine, or a Class 2, which is 120 days maximum and a $750 fine. So exactly what you were each saying in different ways. At one time, they were the maximum penalties, the same ones for ordinance violations and that type of conduct in the state. But now, because they changed it several years ago, that's what the Colorado Supreme Court took up to say, now that not only municipal court in Aurora, but in many other municipalities across the state had not changed. Some were changed, but not all. And so our maximum penalty for all, other than accepted things, but generally, and that left the parties, right, the defense attorneys and the prosecutors, able to make plea bargains. And if they agreed to that, then the judge would say, yes or no, I'll accept that. Or if someone was convicted, then that was up to the judge to make the determination of what was appropriate from that 0 to 364 days in jail, or zero fine up to $2,650.
Which is fine, but we kept seeing repeat offenders out there constantly. So I don't know if the judges were not imposing really what should have probably been imposed.
So just that general point, I wanted to make sure that you understood that at one point, yes, they were the same, and then a few years ago, that change was made at the state legislature. So, but just to be clear, the city attorney has always given us the direction, the Criminal Justice Division, that as soon as Camp came out, or Simmons, is the Aurora case. As soon as that came out, which was December 22nd of 2025, that was the law, which we fully understand, the judges understand, the public defenders understand, and we are to follow that. And so we've been doing that, all of us, to the best of our ability, working together to do that. But we are taking on this review as asked, and also really looking at what safeguards we can put in place within our office and I think other parts of the court until and unless there is something more specific on each and every charge. So I would also say that when someone comes in to the court on a new charge, right, a case that happened after the decision, which was, again, December of 25, then that case is looked at as far as which charge it is. And my understanding is the judges are giving an arraignment based upon, here is the possible penalties, and sometimes they have to say, in the examples of the value cases, right? If the theft is from, right, 0 to 300, this would be the penalty. If the theft was an amount of 300 to 1,000, this could be the penalty if it was over 1,000. But on most charges, it would be the maximum penalty in this court would be blank, which may be different than what our code says right now because it says up to 364 days. So, and so that's kind of how the judges and also the prosecutors are handling new cases, right? We would not make a plea bargain offer that expanded and went back to what it used to be. Some cases might have had up to 364 days. Now, if it is akin to or equivalent to what a class 2 misdemeanor would be, it would be up to 120 days. And so another thing that both Ms. Cadiz and I really agree on is because it's akin to what they're calling a class 2 misdemeanor in the state court, we don't think it's appropriate for people to be calling it a class 2 misdemeanor here because it really isn't legally. It's a legal difference. It's still a municipal ordinance violation. So that's one of the things that can be confusing to independent defendants or if they have cases other places. So. And then one other thing that we kind of wanted to point out is there are some cases where there would have been a previous sentence before the camp ruling, right, which was in December, that might still be pending in the municipal court. Maybe not active, but it's still out there. And so those are some of the things that we really considered. And I want to just give you a couple of examples of that. Because the previous sentence would have happened before the decision came down, and we will say we were all waiting on that decision for a very, very long time. So some of the cases that it looked like could be impacted by that were stayed, meaning we stopped where the case was, looked at where it was in the process, how much speedy trial remained, and then that case was just stayed. We started at 30 days, and then when we didn't get the opinion, at some point it went to 60 days, and that would be called up every 60 days to see if we had an opinion, rather than going forward to trial and then having to deal with that. So we had those, I'll say, category of cases, which were a lot, but those were just stayed, and now we're dealing with those. If the person wants to go to trial, then we'll go to trial, and now we know what the maximum sentence will be. Sometimes the same, sometimes different. But this other category of cases, we've spent a lot of time on reviewing, and so I wanted to kind of talk to you about those. And that is if a previous sentence before the Supreme Court ruling came out, it could happen that someone was sentenced. And one of the very common things that we do in the municipal court and other courts as well is to sentence someone and use a condition of having 12 months of no further violations of the law. And that is to try to give incentive not to have any further violations. Sometimes you'll suspend jail, and you could suspend the entire jail sentence or a large part of it. Sometimes you'll suspend a fine. So there are times that we just give a fine, but we'll say $2,000, and we're going to suspend $1,800 of that on condition that you have no further violations.
And Julie, real quick, so the council members that I've been talking to about this, I use the term exposure time, right? That if you violate the terms and conditions of your probation, you could expose yourself to that number, and that's what she's talking about here. They're not actually going to jail on those until they have proceedings that I'm sure you're about to get to.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. So to give an example, if we made an offer and someone accepted this as the sentence, pleading guilty to one charge, the charge of reckless endangerment, all right? If we made the offer, we'll give you 180 days jail, but we're going to suspend that whole 180 days jail on 2 conditions. One, that you participate in and complete an anger management course, and 2, that you have no further violations for the next 12 months. And that means, just to let you know, no further charge, and then we have to prove that charge against you. So it's not just that you get charged. Either you go to trial and you're found guilty, or if you enter a plea of guilty, right? So if you're agreeing to that second charge, then you're going to get the 180 days jail on the first case, the reckless endangerment case, because you had a new violation. Now, you could also get a sentence on that violation, but that's what that no further violations clause is. So the reason we're talking about that example, if we had made that plea agreement, let's just say on December 1st of 2025, and the person pled guilty to reckless endangerment, got 180 days jail, 180 days suspended on no further violations, and the counseling, let's say they finished the counseling. But when that Supreme Court on 12/25/25 came out, the sentence was completely accurate, authorized, everything when we made that sentence. But because the new law came out and said, in the future, reckless endangerment at the state level is one of those that only has a maximum of 120 days jail, right? So we've suspended 180 days jail on condition you not have any further violations. So we hope that that was incentive and that person never gets the second charge. But if they would get a new charge that they were then violated, then we, from the prosecutor standpoint, you have to file something to revoke the sentence in the first case. So if that happens, you go through a process, there's due process, but if they're found to be in violation, then really you're getting a new sentence. It's not just the old sentence of 100 days. You're really revoking and getting the new sentence. But because there are cases out there, because of the 12-month violations, those we also wanted to look at just by way of safeguarding that if that comes up, because we have a lot of cases, and we have a lot of those cases that are out there. So rather than just waiting, even though it would be a new sentence, and we're hoping we won't see very many of those people come back and be in violation, but if we do, that, I guess, would be that exposure time that Pete was talking about, and that's what we wanted to look at. So we have taken it upon ourselves to look at really anything that the public defenders gave us. You know, we asked for a list from them. We looked at everybody that was serving a jail sentence in either jurisdiction as soon as the Simmons decision came out. And so we tried to look at all the different categories of things that might be an issue. What we have recently done is go through the listing of all the cases that they looked at, and we tried to work with court administration to see about those suspended sentences that were out there. So we have reviewed those. There were over 300, don't know the exact number, between 300 and 500 cases that we reviewed together, and then we asked Judge Day to give us a time frame, which we did last week. The two of us went before Judge Day, and we took all of those cases and made a record. And in those cases that there was, I'll call it a new maximum penalty, we did a one-page document that just said, here is a joint notice. If this case comes up again, we've got paper in the court file, and we both have a copy of it as well, saying, we've reviewed this, we agree, like in my example of reckless endangerment, we agree that if something happens, the new maximum sentence will be 120 days, even though it may say 180, because it used to be 364 would have been okay. So if that makes sense.
And I'll note, Julie, too, that the law didn't require us to do that, but I wanted to let everybody know that we took it upon ourselves because Ms. Cadiz asked us to do it. Julie and I did because, again, there's still be due process, a judge involved, as Julie was talking about, on a new sentence. we would still only recommend whatever it is. It would be capped at 120 in Julie's example. So I want to say, but we went a step further than most cities are doing on going ahead and getting that done. And I applaud Elizabeth and Julie for getting that done last week, so.
Councilmember Bergen?
2 questions. First, did you use AI to help do this? Because you should have.
We did not.
I have forbidden the use of AI in my office, just so you know.
I think our city policies allow that.
Okay. Just question on, you said earlier, I think it was Elizabeth Cadiz that said 25 violations in the city code would be considered petty offenses under the state code, like the trespassing and is that, so if someone is trespassing a property, then nothing happens? Is that, what's a petty?
Petty offense is just distinguishable based on the max authorized sentence. So under the state code, it's up to 10 days, up to a $300
$300 fine, yep.
Or both.
Or both.
That's the-
And so, right, trespass is an example, but there's like 24 others that we identified that what we had to look at is whether the conduct that's punished under our ordinance is also punished under a state code section.
So it's still punished?
Yes, it's still punished
Okay.
and there's still jail. But we only identified 4 that had comparables that were fine only. And then remember too, that, you know, as I pointed out, like there's a whole gamut, but those that we find, we agree were not impacted, meaning there's not a state code corollary, those still are up to the 364 at this point, right? Like that those aren't affected by the camp decision per se. So that's where like the aggressive begging and the unlawful peeping and some other failure to obey, those are still, right? There's not an argument to be made that those would exceed the state max. And the only other thing is, as you can tell, like it's, you know, it's a lot of sort of, we've all been operating in good faith, and I think obviously reviewing these sentences was a testament to that, but it's tricky every single day in every single different courtroom when someone comes in on one of these charges, and the code still says up to 364 is the general penalty provision. We largely have agreed, but like, what we've agreed on isn't necessarily what the judge agrees on. And so I guess this is, you know.
What about failure to appear?
Failure to appear because of the state law.
Right.
That was a different state law. Right?
So failure to appear.
So we can't.
Can't even.
We can't charge it as a separate offense, but the judges can still issue a warrant for failure to appear as a condition of their bond that they failed to appear, but it's not going to be a separate criminal offense for the actual act of not appearing.
Okay.
And that's by state law.
For the theft, for instance, the mandatory minimums, the motor vehicle theft is another one that we disagree on, but only because there's, you know, it's really a matter of how you read or interpret the code section and whether it aligns with the felony. So that's now under the state code, motor vehicle theft is punished as a felony.
Right.
But like under the theft that you were pointing out, where you were saying, you know, we had these harsher penalties, we did, but largely the maximum authorized sentences wouldn't necessarily change, right? Like, so even in this situation where we had a mandatory minimum 3 days, the judge could still give someone 3 days. It
Or
could
10.
be mandatory, but the max authorized sentence is really all we're focused on. So just to keep that in mind. It doesn't eliminate all authority.
It doesn't eliminate the minimum.
Until you all change the code, if that's what you decide to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And by the way, and I'll state this too, as has been directed by the majority of council, my office is not enforcing the mandatory minimums right now because of some direction, but they are still, yeah.
And to be clear,
Yeah.
we are operating under, there are 2
Yep.
different code sections. So I don't want to make it, and not that my boss
Right.
did, but I don't want to make it sound like we're not following the law. There is either theft, which is one violation that we had before. And then council put in retail theft, which is a separate ordinance, and that had the mandatory minimums. There were a few changes, like we had to prove that somebody had a retail license, you know, that's who you were stealing from. And so we are now going forward with the theft cases, but we're using that original theft 9474 rather than
During the plea bargain process,
9485.
right? So you're charged with retail theft, you come in and goes, hey, if you plead to regular theft, you don't have to do the mandatory minimum jail. So the law is still there the way it
Yeah.
is, but that's been my direction.
Correct.
That we are not enforcing those at the moment.
And just so you know, we're still analyzing that case on its own merit. If that is somebody that had 15 priors, we still may be asking for more than the mandatory minimum, which we did before if we felt like it deserved that. So it still may be getting that sentence. It's just not that it has to be in every case if they had, you know, only 2 priors, that it had to be that mandatory
Do
minimum.
we track, though, the repeat offenses? Like, once you're doing whatever
Yes,
sentence you give, you track it in our system?
yes, you can.
So we know how many times people have, okay.
When the case is complete, and I will tell you, that would be very, very hard to do right now because of all of these stays that I was talking about for these decisions. So many of those cases, even the ones that in the beginning were charged based upon the mandatory minimums, I don't have the number, so I'm sorry to not give that,
Okay.
but a low number of those cases have been completed.
Okay,
yet.
are there any further questions? We really would like to get moving to we've got one more
Too
presentation.
many lawyers.
Yes, Councilmember Ford.
Just to clarify, so a judge today could sentence on the Aurora Municipal Code that has yet to be updated? Or like, I'm confused.
Not
Okay.
without violating the Supreme Court decision, but, so the purpose of the penalty provision that's in our code, right, is to provide notice and sentencing even by a judge is, has to comply with the statute, right? And so our ordinance says you can sentence somebody up to 364. Obviously, Judge Day is not doing that right now in certain circumstances, but we're having to sift through which code sections now shouldn't be 364 and should be 120, and, which should be 10 or which should still be 364, and there's some disagreement from here and there, on what that is. But the penalty won't be in violation. I don't believe that there's any penalties right now.
And all lawyers, including the judges, have ethical obligations,
Right.
and we are
Right,
following.
that's what I'm saying. You've
the law.
got the prosecution, you've got the defense, and you've got the judge, all with the safeguards of due process that are making sure that we are all complying with the Simons Camp decision. And of course, if there is a violation, and they come to me and say, Pete, the judge, I think, violated Simons and put somebody in jail too long, I'm going to instruct my team to work with the public defender to file an immediate mandamus or an appeal to the district court to get that undone. But we haven't seen that.
Or we'll litigate that.
Or
right?
litigate
Those are
it.
the
I
things that-
haven't seen it happen. I don't expect it to happen, but I just want to let the council know there are safeguards in place to make sure that we don't violate the law.
All right.
Mayor,
Okay, last question, Mayor Pro Tem.
can I just request that we have continuous, periodic updates
Very well.
at study session as we're going through this
I'll tell you the
process?
next.
Can we have it go to public safety? I mean, isn't that where it's supposed to
Yeah,
go?
it can go to public.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the next step, we've done the bulk of it. The next step is actually rewriting the code, getting an ordinance together for that. And we're going to send that to public safety. So if you don't mind, Mayor Pro Tem, we'll just do it there.
Okay.
Kind of where we are. But it's going to take several weeks or months to get that done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John Wesolowski, Acting Director of Housing and Community Services. Angela Garcia, Assistant City Attorney. Animal shelter update. Did I get that right?
You got it.
Okay.
He's looking at you and he knows. He's like, wait a minute, why is Anthony not up there? I'm tapping.
Anthony Youngblood.
Pulls it up. Come on, that's right.
A little confusing.
So while John's pulling that up, we'll cue this up. We wanted to give you all this update. This is really just an update. We're going to be coming forward to you all in the next several weeks here with some contract awards. So we want you to kind of just give you a general update and then have that. So when you're seeing the contract awards in the coming weeks and months, you again have this kind of background as to how we're approaching the project, the full scope of the project, and then we're able to kind of hopefully just get this delivered on time and on budget. So John, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the animal shelter. So we're going to get into it right away here. Right, you'll see here is the rendering of the animal shelter. That's what we're hoping it's all going to look like there. And we'll just get into the presentation. So first of all, where is the animal shelter? The existing shelter is around Chambers and 32nd Avenue, where that star there is. If you haven't been to the shelter, go ahead, please go visit. Go visit Anthony and his staff and how passionate they are, and such a good, what a good job that they do at the shelter.
They are good.
And you'll just know that they love their jobs, and they're just thrilled for this new opportunity for the new shelter. You see the other star that's there. That is where the new shelter is going to be a little, and we're all that area right there that you see, that is all city-owned. So it is city-owned property already, and that's where we've determined where the new shelter will be. Couple facts here a little bit. So project information, the new animal shelter facility is going to be 2 stories and 42,000 square feet. The lower level is going to be where all the animals are. They're going to be 2 intake areas, one for dropping off and surrendering animals, and one where you would like to adopt or foster animals. That'll be there. Location, once again, really close at 32nd and Chambers. Project budget is about $51.3 million. And then we have the anticipated schedule for construction there on the bottom there. Just for a couple, just a little bit of, to compare just a little bit of what the new shelter and the old shelter is. The existing shelter right now that we have is about 13,000 square feet. And so quite the upgrade, if you will. And right at the old shelter, we have about 74 dog kennels and 77 cat kennels. And with the new shelter, we're going to have 118 dog kennels and 110 cat kennels. So a lot more. Too many cats?
Whoa.
I think you just made about 50% of the population upset right now, but but you know, we'll move on.
Very good.
So funding, how are we paying for this? There are several funding sources that we have stacked here for this. We have ARPA funds, COPs. We've had 2 tremendous gifts. We had a state gift.
Wow.
And we also had a catio gift. If you don't know what a catio is, it's like a cat condo. So, so it's for indoor and outdoor. They can go indoor, outdoor. They could be in their condo. They can hang out, and hopefully they'll get adopted much quicker because they're so happy. Yeah. So.
No.
And then some impact fees and some capital funds there. Any questions so far? No. Okay. So I'm going to turn this next slide over to Katie. She'll go ahead and.
Hi, my name is Katie Gargaro. I'm with Infrastructure Strategies, and we're helping Public Works and HCS deliver this project. But on this slide, you're going to see a whole bunch of delivery methods. And a delivery method is a tool that the City of Aurora uses to organize, manage, and execute projects from inception all the way to completion. This slide is showing 3 common delivery methods. The first one, design, bid, build, is probably the one that you're most familiar with. It's the least collaborative of the 3, however. The next 2, design, build, and CMGC, are more collaborative and known as alternative delivery methods. To give you an example of what each delivery method might be most useful for, I'm going to walk you through a kitchen renovation. So if you have a kitchen and you know the color of your cabinets and you know the make and model of all of your appliances and exactly where they're sitting in your kitchen, design, bid, build would probably be the most straightforward. If you have a set budget for a project, but you're unsure of what that budget can buy for you, and you need some help kind of choosing the different elements of your kitchen, design build would probably be the most useful. That's the delivery method that you're going to hire a team that helps you create the vision within the budget that you have. And then the last one is if you have an idea of what the kitchen kind of looks like, but you need some expert advice on how to make those final last decisions to make your vision come true, CMGC would be the most useful for that. You're bringing in all of the experts during the planning and design stages. And that's it.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. And then next, we just have the Gantt chart for the project. You can see where we're starting. Are starting in 2026 and then are ending in 2028. That's the whole breakdown of the project there. And risks. So with any construction projects, there are risks. We know that. So there could be in the next six months, permitting delays, contracting delays, all the things that are there right now. We're monitoring those. We don't see anything as of right now, but closely monitoring to make sure that we're on top of those risks. Long-term risks for monitoring, long lead times for equipment, utility delays, Mother Nature, and we want to make sure that we're doing our community outreach and are moving correctly. So we want to make sure that those are done correctly as well. So those could be, just we want to take the time to get it done right.
We might have buried the lead there. We're using CMGC for this project.
Yes.
So if you don't remember that, sorry. We are using
Yes.
CMGC for this project.
Yes.
Because we had a general idea, we had some expertise in that, so we knew that was the delivery, which is, again, one of the reasons we're here. So that, as you heard, it's very collaborative. It's a little more iterative. So in a design bid build, we would have designed the entire thing and just done one big contract award. You had it. Maybe that design build would have been kind of the same thing. We would have done a not to exceed contract. There might have been some iterative inside that, but we would have awarded one contract up front. With the CMGC, we're going to be doing bid packages as we go along, right? So that's why I'm telling you all this, because you're going to see multiple contracts and bid awards coming forward in the coming months. And I don't want you to be going, Jason, we've awarded this contract 12 times in the last, so this is why. It's that iterative process. We want you to understand we're doing that because everything you heard, right? It allows us to kind of pull in different experts. It allows us to really maximize that budget, decide where we want to spend it. What are we hearing from the community as to what's important, and respond to kind of what we're seeing on the ground at the time in terms of the needs.
How does that keep you in budget?
So again, part of that is we're going back to, we have that budget clearly identified on the front end. And the other thing you need to do to be successful in staying on budget is you need to have a well-defined budget and scope. So our scope that we went in very hard on is exactly how many, you heard from John, how many kennels we're talking about, overall gross square footage. So those are things that really can't slip. We can't go 42,000 square feet, I don't know, 60,000 much better. Well, you're not delivering a 60,000 square foot building for that same piece. How we finish that 42,000 square feet, there's some wiggle room within that. And I love the analogy that was used. So bigger kitchen island, smaller oven, so that type of thing, that's within the realm, not I want to blow down a wall and expand my kitchen into the living room. That's different budget.
Mayor, can I just ask Jason a question? Are you planning, I know that's definitely a lot more kennels than what we currently have, but are you planning for a little bit of growth? Because I noticed that even when you look on Nextdoor and things like that, you always see abandoned animals or animals that are just kind of out there. And I know that, that just doesn't seem like a lot
That needs out there. We're expanding.
And especially with the growth of
We're
Aurora.
allowing for future growth, not necessarily in this facility, but I think if you remember the needs assessment that came forward as part of Build Up Aurora, we talked about as a future phase, potentially expanding. I'm looking at Roberto, and so, yeah, go ahead, Roberto.
So the design and part of the CMGC models, we design it to what we have for a budget, but then we've also have areas in the design of the building and the footprint that allow for expansion in 5 years, 10 years, if we need to do that. We know that there's a demand right now. That's why we're at capacity. We have a fraction of the square footage. So we have incorporated that into the architectural design, and it allows for future councils to make a determination if they want to do that. But we know the demand is far outstrips what we have now. We're going to try to meet it, but I think the facility now has room for growth.
How is the participation in your foster care program?
Oh, our foster program is doing great. Anthony, if you want to share just really quickly,
In 2025, we had over 1,200 animals go to our foster program. Most of those are cats, sorry, Councilmember, but dogs go there, so medical treatments. The cat season, we had no winter, so cat season's going to come early. A lot of young cats, everyone in the room, come get a free cat. I'm ready to give it to you.
Councilmember Berger will take 3.
Okay, well, that's incorporated into this overall plan,
Yes,
correct?
we're still going to build up our foster program so we can save more animals in residents' homes instead of in the shelter.
Okay. Councilmember Horton.
One question and one comment. Question, I know you have community outreach here in terms of risk monitoring long-term. I imagine our question is staff feedback being part of the design? of the building, the flow, how, just to make sure that everyone that has been in the current facility has a say in what this new design is going to look like and flow.
Absolutely. Staff have been embedded in the design process from beginning to end. Even some of that haircut process, you know, when you start thinking of all the ideas that you can have and all these great ideas, well, we had to kind of bring that back a little bit for what we could afford with what we had. But yes, from the very beginning, staff have been involved in the design of the entire facility.
Fantastic, thank you. And then my comment is, I just recently adopted a pup from the Aurora Animal Shelter, so thank you guys. Yeah, it came with a little cold, but that's okay. It happens, and so really appreciate the work that you all do,
great.
staff does, and I'm so glad I have a new addition to my family, so thank you.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you for helping out.
And I just want to say, if you've never done a ride-along with an animal protection officer, I would encourage you to do it. It's pretty impressive. Okay, any other questions? All right. Thanks. We're
adjourned on this?
We're adjourned, and we will reconvene at 5 p.m. For executive sessions. We will reconvene in
Everybody, grab your dinner and then we'll reconvene.
6 more minutes. 5